Where's the proof? Does peer counseling really work? Does it really help anybody? Did it help you? Let's talk about it. My name is Jessica Scalzo from Compassionate Peer Counseling, and I want to address all of these issues. So I think let's start with some public testimony, personal public testimony. I'm going to be reading these 3 different personal testimonies from a brochure that 2 local Seattle peer activists created, which has been very helpful to me and very informative. They are Rebecca Miller and Laura Van Tosh, and they put together this brochure, and it's called Peer Support Evidence and Experience, a quick guide to research and evidence on peer support. And that it is. The first personal testimony to peer support is by Andy Radovich, who's an LGBTQ activist in Seattle, Washington. And he says, "There's something about the power of lived experience. Peer support does that and so much more. It reduces stigma and it's vital to my life in recovery." I'm grateful that Anthony he brought up stigma, because stigma is one of the biggest barriers to people seeking treatment and then further going on their recovery journey and getting to a place of wellness. And I think this is very important to talk about stigma, and I'm going to do another video on it because there's a lot to say and more research findings on stigma itself. The next one is from Janine Bertram, a national disability rights leader in Burien, Washington. And she says, "Peer support has helped me form community with coworkers with similar disabilities and to remind me that I have a right to live in the least restrictive environment, as the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision clearly states." And I think even if it doesn't state that, yes, you absolutely have the right. And we could go on about that topic as well. The last personal testimony here is from Sharon Holmes, an African-American peer leader in Lakewood, Washington. She says, "I suffered in silence for many years. And today I value peer supports in my life because with shared experiences, we provide one another with hope, emotional, and social support. This is something doctors cannot always provide. Unfortunately, this is true." Now, you might hear me saying peer support, but at first I started talking about peer counseling. Well, what's the difference? A lot of times these terms are used interchangeably. You will hear, I'm going to say peer counseling a lot because that is the term I have chosen. Peer support, same thing. There's also the term peer specialist. There is the term wellness coaches. I think a lot of us, including myself, we're familiar with the term mentor. Somewhat the same, I think, very similar, if not totally the same. There's recovery coaches. So these are just different terms that mean peer-to-peer, helping each other, having understanding, being relatable, knowing what it's like. All different terms, as peer supporters, wellness workers, recovery coaches, we are all supportive, helping people work towards their wellness and recovery goals. And we do this in a lot of different ways. So, my way is one-on-one peer counseling sessions, and this might lead to group sessions and doing community navigation, which is what a lot of peers do. Also there's peer workers that support people with services in the community. So there's lots of things that we do, which makes peer work very, very cool. Moving on, I want to talk about Sherry Mead in 2003 gave a great definition for what peer support is. And she says it's a system of giving and receiving help founded on key principles of respect, shared responsibility, and mutual agreement on what is helpful. I love this definition. I love that she's talking about mutual agreement because in my case, the best part about peer counseling is the mutuality of it. I learn just as much. I can't say for sure what someone else learns, but I know I learn so much in a one-on-one peer counseling session. When I am talking to someone about different practices, different ways of having wellness, it challenges me to do these things in my own life and to further my own recovery, as well as sometimes topics are brought up that I didn't even know about. So I'm learning new things. It's keeping it fresh for me. is keeping me moving forward, is bringing in new ideas, fresh air, so that I don't stay stagnant and I continue on my recovery. Because change and continually changing and continually going forward is crucial for recovery. It's not a place that I get to and then that's it. No, it's a continual process. And I think that's very important to understand, for anybody working on recovery. Now, I like that this brochure goes on to say that peer support has been called a disruptive innovation through showing that recovery is real and blurring the us versus them false dichotomy, pushing for rights and challenging the role of patient or consumer. This is important as well because related to what I was just speaking of, in peer counseling, there is no hierarchy. I'm not an expert and I'm not dealing with a patient. We're here, we're equal. I'm in a different place in my recovery, but we're both on the path. And so we definitely help each other. Let's talk a little bit about the history. This is really cool. This brochure, I didn't know this before I read this. This goes back to 18th century. We're talking about peer support in the 18th century in France. And this goes on to say that historical roots to France in late 18th century. Jean-Baptiste Poussin hired former patients to work in the hospital as they were averse from active cruelty towards patients. Wow, that's quite a statement. I'm going to read it one more time. Jean-Baptiste Poussin hired former patients to work in the hospital as they were averse from cruelty towards patients. There's a lot in that statement. That's a loaded statement. I definitely take from it that he felt that people who knew what it was like would offer kindness and compassion to others going through whatever they were going through. Whereas someone who does not know maybe may not have as much understanding or as much patience. And this is quite powerful. It's another reason that peer support is powerful in itself. Okay, how about some research finding? How about some real scientific evidence? Yes, there is research being done. Much more research needs to be done. The research findings I'm going to be reading for are from this brochure, but even just last week at a webinar I was involved in, there was more research findings, more positive research findings. This top one is from Bellamy et al. In 2018. And what they found is that evidence across studies basically finds that there is increases in hope, in empowerment, and in quality of life. Now, even if we're not suffering from some behavioral health issue, who doesn't want more hope, more empowerment, and better quality of life? I think right now with COVID-19, almost everybody wants more hope, more empowerment, and better quality of life. So that's relatable to everybody. Peer support, is really crucial for everybody. And I think we can find it in new ways in our everyday lives. This next finding says early outcomes showed peers equivalent to non-peer staff around traditional services. With some studies showing slightly better outcomes with peer staff. We're catching up. The next one says peer support resulted in longer community tenure in those receiving peer support. This is from 2007. I take this to mean that peers who are receiving peer support are in the community. They're being engaged. They're not in a partial hospitalization treatment. They're not in crisis services, or they're less and less in these services because now they're engaged. And to me, this is really a great purpose of peer support is we're trying to be a wellness service. We're trying to, if we have to say preventative, be preventative, but I still think that even has a negative connotation. We're not trying to wait until there's no more choices and there's only crisis services. I don't think that helps anybody. We don't want to just be depending on crisis services as the only thing we offer. And so that builds a case, in my eyes, for more and more peer support services so that we use less and less of these crisis and hospitalization services. So this is an important finding. I really like this next one. Peer staff show ability to reach people who are considered difficult to engage. Yes. If this is you, if you have been told this, or maybe you feel this way, I don't know if anyone feels this way, please reach out to Compassionate Peer Counseling if you are having eating disorder issues, because I would love to speak with you. The next one supports the first one. It says increases in empowerment. This next one says increased sense of independence for both peer staff and person receiving services, as well as a role shift. So this, I think, refers to what I was speaking about as far as when I'm working with a peer. It's equal, it's mutual. I'm getting helped just as much. There is a role shift. There's a sense of independence for both of us because we're both working on our recovery. We're both moving forward. We're both going through change. And the last one supports the first one. It says increased hope. And without hope, people most likely will not take that first difficult step forward in their recovery. It's too scary. If there's no hope, why take a step? There's no chance. So hope is very important to moving forward in recovery. And the last thing addresses the last question that I asked, which was, does peer counseling help? Did it even help you? In my experience having an eating disorder, I felt very isolated and very alone. If I had peer support, I wasn't very aware of it. And I would say there was very little of it because I did not know anybody who was going through an eating disorder, or in the same vein, who was recovered. I didn't even know it existed. I felt it existed, but no, I certainly didn't know anybody. And now I have feelings of grief around that, wishing that it was available to me. And this feeling, this grief, is highly motivating me, and it's motivating me to provide these services and this support to others who are working to recover. So it ends up being something positive. That concludes it for now. I want to do another video later about peer counseling and specifically eating disorders. So that'll be coming in the future. Thank you for your time and attention, and we'll talk soon. Bye.